All right, welcome back, Algebra 2 Trig. Today we're going to look at filling out the unit circle, and then in the next lesson we're going to see how we can start using it. But it's important to be able to fill one out completely. We're looking at filling out the degrees, the radians, and then each of the ordered pairs that's associated with each of the angles. All right, so let me minimize this thing. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we're going to start filling out the degrees first. And there's a pattern for each of these, just like the radians and the ordered pairs that we're going to fill out. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with the degrees. And so we're going to start at 0 degrees right there. All right, and now we're going to just start walking around in the counterclockwise direction. And so the next angle would be 30 degrees, and then 45 degrees, and then 60 degrees, and then 90. All right, so you can see that 30, 45, 60, and 90. That's the first quadrant. Now, if you continue this pattern of adding 30, adding 15, adding 15, adding 30, you can walk around all the way around this unit circle and finish up at where 360 degrees is, one complete revolution. All right, so let's keep that pattern going. So we're going to add 15, okay, and so add 30, sorry. So that's going to be 120 degrees, 90 plus 30. And then we're going to add 15, so 135, and then add 15 again, so 150. And then now we're going to add 30, and so that'll be at 180. And you can see that that makes sense. We're at 180 degrees halfway around the circle. All right, so add 30, add 15, add 15, add 30. So let's keep going and move this down. All right, so we're going to add 30. So that's going to be 210, and then we're going to add 15, so 225, and then we're going to add 15 again, so 240, and then add 30, and so that's going to be 270 degrees. All right, so we're at the 3/4 mark, and now we're going to add 30 again, so 300, add 15, add 15, so that's 330, and then we add 30 and we're at 360. All right, and so that's all the degrees. All right, so just go around and keep adding 30, adding 15, 15, 30, 30, 15, 15, 30. All right, so now let's do the radians. So at 0 degrees, we're going to be at 0 radians. All right, I'll just put in the rad, so it's a little different than degrees. All right. And so what we're going to do here is, well, we can put in the 90 degrees. So some of these radians we should already have memorized. All right, so we have the 90, the 180, the 270, and then the 360. Those can go in pretty quick. All right, so we know 180 degrees directly across. We know that's pi. Okay, pi is 180. If we cut that in half, that's going to get us our 90 degrees. 180 divided by 2 is 90, and pi divided by 2 is, well, it's just pi over 2. Okay, and then we're at 1.5 pi at the 3/4 mark, 270 degrees. And so you can kind of see if you were to add pi, 180, plus a half a pi, okay, that's 1.5 pi. Okay, 1 pi plus a half pi is 1.5. And so that's 3 pi over 2. So we're going to write it as 3 pi over 2 instead of 1.5. All right, and then one complete revolution, 360, is 2 pi radians. All right. And so you can see if you cut 2 pi in half, you're at 180, which is where pi is. All right, so now let's keep going. And so what I usually do is I tell my students to put in all the 45 degree multiples of 45. And so that multiple of 45 is going to be that middle line between the 3 each time. Okay, so each of these quadrants have 3 lines in them. And so the middle one is your multiple of 45. All right. So we're going to start off with the first 45 degrees, and that's pi over 4. Okay, so 45 degrees is pi over 4. Now, all the other multiples of 45 degrees is a multiple of pi over 4, and they're odd multiples of pi over 4. So we start with the 1 pi over 4, and then we can put in the 3 pi over 4, because that's the next odd number, and these are all pi over 4s. Then we're down at the 225 mark, and that's 5 pi over 4, because that's the next odd number. Okay, and then I'm sure you can figure out what the next odd number would be. For 315, that's going to be 7 pi over 4. All right, so 1357. All right, and that's it, 1357. All right, so now everything else is going to be a multiple of pi over 6. Now some of them will simplify, but you start counting as a pi over 6. Okay, so the first one, 30 degrees, is pi over 6. Okay, so what we're going to do is jump the 45 degrees, okay, and because we already have it, and we're going to put in the 60 degree. Well, if we start with 1 pi over 6, then the next number would be 2 pi over 6. All right, so this is 2 pi over 6. But we can simplify that down to just pi over 3. Okay, and 60 degrees, if you were to do the conversion, it is pi over 3. All right, so we start with 1 pi over 6, then we had 2 pi over 6. Now you can count the 90 degree one, that's 3 pi over 6. Okay, 3 pi over 6 is pi over 2. Okay, so 3 pi over 6. Now we're at 4 pi over 6. Okay, that's 4 pi over 6. But that can simplify down to 2 pi over 3. All right, we're going to skip the 45. Okay, so we were at 4 pi over 6. Now we're at 5 pi over 6. And that one doesn't simplify. 5 pi over 6. All right, and then at the 180 degree, or pi, that's 6 pi over 6. Well, 6 pi over 6 simplifies down to pi, so that means that you are counting it correctly, okay, if you do this. Okay, so you should be at 1 pi over 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 pi over 6. That's the halfway mark. All right, so let's keep going. All right, so then the next number would be 7 pi over 6. All right, that's our first blank space, 7 pi over 6. We skip the 45. The next one's going to be 8 pi over 6. Okay, that one's 8 pi over 6, but that one simplifies down to 4 pi over 3. All right, and then at the 3 pi over 2, or 270, that's 9 pi over 6, and that simplifies to 3 pi over 2. And then 10 pi over 6. All right, and that simplifies down to 5 pi over 3. And then we skip the 45, so we were at 10, now we're at 11 pi over 6. 11 pi over 6. And then one complete revolution would be 12 pi over 6, and 12 pi over 6 simplifies to 2 pi. All right, and so now you know that it's complete. All right, and if you look at each of the denominators in the quadrants, okay, you have a 3, 4, and 6 in each of them. 3, 4, 6, 3, 4, 6. And if you go along each of the diagonal lines, okay, so if I took the 30 degree diagonal just for an example, and you follow it all the way across, all right, you have another one that's a pi over 6. Okay, it's 7 pi over 6. And you can do that with the pi over 4 if you follow it all the way across through its diagonal. All right, pi over 4 lines up with a 5 pi over 4, so another pi over 4. And same with the pi over 3 lines up with another multiple of pi over 3. Okay, and you can see it's 4 pi over 3. All right, and then they go across also. So if you look at the pi over 3, and you can see directly across horizontally, you pick another pi over 3 up. Okay, it's 2 pi over 3. And a pi over 4, okay, if you go directly across, all right, horizontally, you'll pick up another pi over 4. It's 3 pi over 4. And pi over 6, go horizontally, directly across, you pick up another pi over 6. It's a 5 pi over 6. So you can see that everything should line up with the same denominators. Okay, and you can go vertically, it works vertically also. All right, so if we look at pi over 6, okay, if you go down, okay, it lines up with the first angle that's 11 pi over 6, so another multiple of pi over 6. And it works with the pi over 4 and pi over 3 and so on. All right, so that's filling out all the degrees in radian. So you kind of want to memorize those patterns, okay? All right, so now the ordered pair. So each of these angles line up with an ordered pair on the unit circle. So if we let the radius of the circle be 1 unit in length, then if we go out to the right, okay, we're going to be at, say, -1, 0. Okay, so it has 1 unit in length over here. All right, so let's keep going. So the origin's at 0, 0. And if we go to the right 1 unit, then the ordered pair, I'll put it right here, is going to be 1, 0. 1 comma 0. All right, and then if we go where the 90 degrees, okay, so again, we want to think this circle is 1 unit in length, the radius is 1, then we're going to be at 0 comma 1. All right, and then at 180 degrees, we're on the negative side, and so this is going to be at negative 1 comma 0, so that's where 180 degrees is located, or pi. And if we come down directly vertically, at 270, again, the radius is 1. That has an ordered pair of 0 comma negative 1. All right, so get your quadrant on the x and y axis. Angles in there, the 0, the 90, 180, and 270. And so either a 0 or a 1 or a negative 1. All right, so now what we're going to do is put in the other ordered pairs. All right, so the 30 degrees is going to be root 3 over 2, comma 1 half. All right, root 3 over 2, comma 1 half. All right, now I'm going to show you why real quick. I'll just do it down here. All right, so this is from the special right triangles from geometry. All right, so if I put a 30 degree here and a 60 degree here, all right. So if we remember our 30, 60, 90 triangle shortcuts and the ratios, across from the 30 was u, and then the hypotenuse is 2 times u, and the 60, across from the 60 is u root 3. All right, so if we let the hypotenuse be 1, like on our circle, the radius is 1 unit. If we set those equal to each other, we can solve for u, and so we get u equals 1 half. Well, that's this side right here. All right, and then if I put 1 half in for u on the across from the 60, I get 1 half times root 3, or root 3 over 2, and that's the x side. All right, so this is our x side, and this is our y side on this 30 degree angle, okay, down at the bottom. So now we can see where they're located on this triangle, okay, on this 30 degree angle. All right, so if I have this right triangle here, I'm just going to show you why, again, where it lines up. Okay, our y value is 1 half, because this is 30 degrees here. And then our x value is root 3 over 2. All right, and then our radius is 1 unit in length. All right, so that's why you get those numbers. Okay, so then on the 45 degree, the ordered pair is going to be root 2 over 2, comma root 2 over 2. So this one's pretty easy to memorize because they're exactly the same for both x and y. All right, so again, I'll come down here for the 45 degree one and show you why this one works. So again, using our special right triangles from geometry, okay, so we had a 45 and a 45, 90. The shortcuts that we wanted to remember were u, so the sides were the same because it was a 45, 45, 90. So if the angles are the same, the legs are the same. And then the hypotenuse was u root 2. All right, now if we let the hypotenuse be 1, again, this is the radius of the circle. If we set those equal to each other and solve it for u, we would divide by root 2. Okay, and then you have to remember, we have to rationalize the denominator. And so root 2 times 1, I'm going to run out of room here, was root 2 on top, and then root 2 times root 2 on the bottom is root 4, but that's really just 2. So we get u equal to root 2 over 2. Well, that's what this side is, root 2 over 2. And then it's also the same as this side, root 2 over 2. Okay, so they're the same. All right, so that's where they go. Again, that's our x and our y values. And then for the 60 degree, that's easy because if you get to 30, all you have to do is switch the x and y's around, because that's what happens on a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. All right, so the x coordinate becomes a half, and the y coordinate becomes root 3 over 2. All right, so you have to memorize root 3 over 2, comma, half for 30, and then root 2 over 2, and then 1 half root 3 over 2. You can see all the denominators are 2's. Okay, so it's pretty easy. All right, now if you can memorize that pattern for those first 3 angles, they're just going to repeat for all the other angles. Okay, so directly across from where pi over 3 is, okay, so I showed you again, pick up another pi over 3, it was 2 pi over 3, that's 120 degrees, it has the exact same ordered pair. Okay, it's just the signs are going to be different because in quadrant 2, we have to remember it's negative, positive. All right, so it would be negative half this time, but positive root 3 over 2, okay, because the signs are negative, positive. I'll put that here just to remind you, negative, positive. Over here in quadrant 1 is positive, positive, everything's positive. All right, so then for the 3 pi over 4, or 135 degrees, we can use the exact same ordered pair as pi over 4. And it's just the sign's different. So it's negative root 2 over 2, because x is negative, and then positive root 2 over 2, because y is positive. So we have negative, positive. And then same for 5 pi over 6, it's the same as 1 pi over 6. Okay, so it's negative root 3 over 2, and positive a half. All right, so again, you can see the 2 pi over 3 and 5 pi over 6 switched. All right, so let's go down into quadrant 3, and again, we can use quadrants 1 or quadrants 2, okay, but using quadrant 1 is pretty easy. So the 7 pi over 6 is the same as 1 pi over 6, just the signs are different. All right, so again, in quadrant 3, the signs are negative, negative. All right, so we're going to use that 7 pi over 6 and 1 pi over 6 ordered pair. So it's going to be negative root 3 over 2, comma, negative 1/2. So everything's negative. And then for 5 pi over 4, it's the same as 1 pi over 4. Again, just everything's negative. So negative root 2 over 2, negative root 2 over 2. And then for the 4 pi over 3, it's the same as 1 pi over 3. All right, so that's going to be negative a half and negative root 3 over 2. All right, so then in this last quadrant 4, the signs are positive, negative. Okay, so positive, negative. And so to get the 5 pi over 3, it's the same as 4 pi over 3 or the same as 1 pi over 3. Just have to get the signs right. All right, so it's going to be positive a half and negative root 3 over 2. Then we're going to be at positive root 2 over 2, but negative root 2 over 2, the 7 pi over 4. And then 11 pi over 6, we're going to have root 3 over 2, positive, and then negative 1/2. All right, and that's the complete unit circle, all the way filled around. Okay? All right, so try to get a blank one. There's a link on my website. Try to download it and then try to do it. Maybe just do the top half, okay, or just the quadrant 1. See if you can get the angles and then the radians and then the ordered pairs. And then work around and see if you can get the rest. And then fill out another unit circle, download another one, and see if you can just get all the degrees and then all the radians and all the ordered pairs. And time yourself. You should be able to fill one of these out completely in like 4 minutes. Okay, I mean the time, if we were in class, I would try to expect it in two minutes, but try and do it in 4 minutes if you can do it. And there's lots of other YouTube videos that you could watch too on how to fill it out. All right, have a good day.